Hello and a very warm welcome to this absolutely new episode of the Values Workshop. I have the privilege to re-begin my um, journey on this podcast with Hemant Gupta, who's been a regular guest. Welcome to the show, Hemant.
Thank you, Thank you. Thank you.
Um I am back from a break of around a month and a half, and a lot of soul searching has happened. And one of the favorite topics I have been having over, I think, over the journey of the podcast for sure, if not before that. But technically, yes, during the when I started the podcast and I didn't know what I was doing with it, yet I jumped into it, and then I decided I will go impromptu after 5 6 episodes. The friend that I started with uh, was there for some time, and then I started doing it with new guests. And every now and then I felt, oh, will I be able to do it? I felt very vulnerable and unsure. Uh, Yet it was uh, never the lack of clarity that was a fear. Like I am into this and I will do well. That somehow was a given. How will I do well, and will every episode be the precisely what I am setting out to do? It wasn't as I found. There were technical issues that would happen at the end of the podcast. Suddenly, the internet would go down, and things like those kept happening. But somehow the heart was stable. Didn't go pitter patter at every nervous stage. And this is something that I have been considering with other people that are confident. When I go out in the world and talk to people, when they are talking about their truths or their propositions or their imagined version of what a subject should be, they are very confident because they have worked out certain logical ways of reaching that place. They've been reasonably successful at it, so they come out and they talk very confidently. And while the kind of space that I've been operating, and like I said, because of the podcast, it's always a little exploratory. And I want to really probe along with you whether the two are contradictory in terms, or can one be confident of one's vulnerability, or the other way around, which is more difficult, can one be vulnerable in one's own confidence? How do you look at this subject? Is there a subject, or am I making this up, or what's happening?
Uh, there are in spirituality and religion, they you often come across this whole idea of rituals.
Yeah.
I think almost all religion have some rituals, and the idea is that to ritualize, to keep going back to them again and again, because we may perhaps forget that they have to be held, disciplined, practiced over a period of time as an anchor or something that grounds us in some sense. So I think whenever I come across questions, wherever there is such wonderful space like the one that you create, Bantu, I try to use this ritual of taking a pause to the question that has just greeted me. And couple of rituals that always have been helpful is, I think, being extremely careful and aware that uh, when we're dealing with language and concepts, they stand in for something. They are not the thing, they stand in for something. For example, when I say the word vulnerable, it can be mapped or indexed something to do with our physiology, our biology, our mental state, our emotional state, and also how it has or does not have a currency in the interpersonal space that we have. There are only a few people where you feel you can be slightly more authentic, slightly more vulnerable, and there are spaces where such things do not have a place. So that's the first thing that is emerging. The second that is emerging is, if I look at us as now perhaps grown-up children and children nevertheless, we were once children in terms of physically children. And if you look at the life of a child, the child is extremely dependent. When the child comes to this world, the child is extremely dependent on the caregiver
Hmm.
for a lot of things for quite some time before the baby is even able to walk and start doing some of the stuff personally, brushing your teeth and cleaning yourself and stuff. Even to that extent, there is a lifespan. It is said that it is perhaps humans are perhaps the one of the rare species where this time span is quite elongated before they get to the world. So before we actually confront the world and take responsibility for our choices and action, there's a controlled environment provided for a lot of us blessed people. Of course, we have people who are orphans, people who are not given this privilege. For them, the life starts much early. But for a lot of us, the life starts very late. Till then, we have a controlled environment. Food is provided, shelter is provided, clothes are provided. Um, how to navigate the world to some extent through some education is provided, not entirely. And then we sort of confront the world someday. We start confronting it in various forms earlier also. It's not that when we go to a school, it's not that you're not confronting another child having emotions, another child having issues, or you having issues with the other. We start doing that, but still there is a controlled environment. The thing that emerges for me is the interdependence. We are not born complete. When we are hungry, we seek something out from nature, put it inside our body, and we then have some kind of, that desire goes away for some time. If we are thirsty, we take water from. So we are coexisting with something outside of us. If we say there is something inside and outside. Uh, And this coexistence means that the tuning is not always there. In the sense, imagine right now, you feel extremely hungry and you want to eat. So obviously, it will depend on what's available at home, what money do you have in pocket. Even if you have that, is it available at home or outside? So then we are constantly tuning in with the environment or the outside, either through people or with nature or with things. We're constantly tuning. And this tuning demands that we're not tuned. There is a lot of non-tuning that happens before we are tuned, before we get that food in the first gulp, the first swallow, the first morsel, the first sip. Till that time, there is a lot of back and forth, hit and miss, trial and error, even at those micro levels, which we don't become aware of most of the times. Now, where does it all take us? There is dependability. There are these micro tuning and micro non-tuning. And over the years, what is our relationship with when we don't get it right, when we don't get the cohabitation with the outside? I think it creates vacuum, it creates uncertainty, it creates insecurities, fears, anxieties, feeling of failures, micro failures, uh, feeling of lost. And we keep gathering all of these over a period of time, but it's just that we are not aware of them. Uh, Maybe the body keeps a score, maybe certain psyche concepts, they keep a score. Uh, and we also keep a score of the opposite of all of this. Sometimes you talk of an idea and the other person is immediately with you. You don't have to spend too much time explaining the idea, and both of you are playing with that idea. Or let's say we are playing something, we're playing cricket, or we're playing any sports, and there is a flow experience that we have. There's absolute tuning happening. So we have these experiences. Uh, we have so many of these experiences at so many scales and micro scales, but our general awareness and conditioning doesn't have a bandwidth and capability to become aware of them, because it could be overwhelming also if we become micro aware of everything all the time, if we don't have the practice. So what happens is, over a period of time, we look at the macro levels of all of these, successes and achievements and efforts and outcomes and inputs and outputs, all of them. At a slightly different scale, we become aware. And we know that it creates something, it does something to us. And sometimes it creates kleshas in us, negativity in us, or something that has to be attended to. It could be in form of not knowing, which is avidya. It could be in form of self-obsession, narcissism, ego. It could be in form of jealousy. It could be in form of insecurities, fears, anxieties, or the ultimate fear of not being here on the planet after some time, death. So, so where am I going with all this? I think the one thing that I think we experience a lot more than we become aware of. What we become aware of, we hold them as maps, but we seldom go deeper into the maps to see that those maps need to be grounded in territories. But we're only moving with maps. We're not going to the territory except for feeling for the territory. Some pain signal coming, some anxiety signals coming. So we have all these experiences. We go through all these experiences. We are not aware of them. If we become aware of them over a period of time and are able to channel them slightly differently, I think we may have revised vulnerabilities and revised opposite of non-vulnerability, whatever the opposite is. And then that helps us deal with our own self and the outside slightly differently in life. That's a slightly longer answer to
No,
some
it is
question.
beautiful because I think for me, you derived a lot of meanings from the word vulnerability, even as you said that these are shells that contain meanings. Words are not an end into themselves. With your last two, three lines, you actually gave me a question that was running in my head. So, in interactions with other people, uh, your examples were more nature based because you gave a water example, food example, even an app example so if I call for something on one of these apps, I have to wait till the time they deliver and then I'm having my first morsel. So point taken that there are levels of vulnerability, there are levels of vulnerable interactions that you are talking about. But strictly this question is human to human. I am unaware what reaction people have to my uh, open-ended way of functioning when I communicate. So I may land up saying, so in a way it's dark, but it just happened yesterday. So as an example, it kind of fits. So a friend was talking that another friend has a ailing parent and we should call him because one of his siblings has said so that it's a good time to call. And my response was, well, no, I won't because I am unaware of what I speak. I will end up aggravating the situation because I say the real thing according to me and I will not beat around the bush even if that person is paining. It's better that he comes when he comes, so then he is ready that he is coming to Bunty for the Bunty kind of communication rather than Bunty entering the equation and then spoiling it, and where he has not called me particularly or given a message. He sends messages, he has been having some troubles once a while, but when he sends me any message, I respond, and my responses are not always positive in the sense of I will not allow too much emphasis on your own grief and stuff like that. I would say calm down and get on, and these are things that are happening, and this is why it is happening. And I don't say this from a confident point of view. It is said from a genuinely empathy kind of view that I have had such experiences due to my life uh, in my life, and I have been benefited because I chose to uh, be this way at that point of time. Whether due to my practice or otherwise, it's a separate thing. But thankfully, during that time, this is how I saw it, and I think you should also try and uh, deal with this. So, while this is a very strong example because there is a mortality involved of sorts, but even in other things, so you and I are sitting down to discuss some project uh, which requires us to be very clear about how we are going to communicate, what are we going to do, what are the terms and conditions, what are the financial remuneration. I am very open-ended. I talk very freely in a flow kind of state most times. And I find that kind of reciprocation may not happen. Some people get intimidated by this, some people are overawed, some people become my fans. Oh my god, you are so funny and you are saying this and whatever. Others try and manipulate my honesty successfully at times. They are, and I may understand this, but because I've chosen not to walk that path, so that happens. And so there are various these. So my question to you is, when what you gave was a descriptive answer, when incorporated in our personalities and dealing with the rest of the world in worldly issues specifically, what do you think is the equation? What happens, and what are your musings on this kind of thing?
Such a beautiful invocation, Bunty. Thank you so much for this. Um, so an interesting question comes up, which is, when we meet, where do we meet? Do we meet where I am? Do we meet where you are? Do we meet in places which are strange to both of us? Or do we meet in places that we have shared something, shared value, shared subject, shared interest, shared experiences? Or do we both go and have completely new experiences and we meet there? Now, this could be in form of language or something to do with our bodies or something to do with an experience, whatever. So the question is, when we meet, where do we meet?
Okay.
And over the years, I realized that for a long period in my life, I was absolutely narcissistic and obsessive about uh, wanting people to meet where I am. And I and the reason I could see and sense that later was invariably I would keep coming back to what I believe in, what I have practices, what experiences I have, and I'm just encouraging others to have them. And I would never, or rather seldom, take perspective of the other, what they feel, what they think, what are they saying, what are they doing. Um, and over the years, it has helped me to at least have first, which is perspective taking. Uh, so imagine I have a set of interactions I have with people. Uh, I think I can never say that, and I don't maintain any inventory even in my head, but there is a heuristic which is I want to keep increasing the needle from where I am to where even others are, or maybe the other grounds that I said we should be able to meet. And over the years, I've realized that each of those teach me differently. Each of them are tests of my practice differently, and they contribute towards my journey in some sense. So that's the first musing that I have, Bunty. I mean, I can volunteer, you may chime in, or maybe something else might emerge.
Beautiful. I didn't ever think of that. Uh, I actually have always thought of it as a practical thing that now that all of the city is dug up, and I get very worked up about having to travel. Most times, most people I land up meeting midway if they are on the opposing side of town, like you are for me. Uh, Most times it is midway, but I can't go. honestly say that the perspective that you mentioned is what makes me do this. It is more like, okay, let's trouble each other halfway and kind of match it. Once a while I travel. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. Just one addition. I believe you've taken that as an input also, but I'm just reinforcing it that one is the physical landscape meeting where we meet, the location, and the other is
I'm
the mental emotional.
I'm yet to come to that
Yeah,
because
sorry,
I
sorry.
did not make the connection vis-a-vis this experience
G
as
G
that.
G G G.
Okay. Uh, I'm yet to. It is a deep contemplation that I would want on this because I'm unsure uh, whether it works the way that you are mentioning. I will need to check it in myself. But one thing now that because you brought this up, pointing out that this is one aspect. One strong aspect of my own self journey is checking whether I am painful to know or am I enjoyable to know as a person. So when I was younger and when I was very proud of my knowledge and uh, growth, there was this clear demarcation that when I was meeting people in a territory of non-professional areas, spirituality and say gurdwaras and other places which required me to serve, uh, my seva bhavna was very good. I would never have any qualms about doing any kind of work and uh, serving and but if you met me later in a professional environment, I was a painful person to know because then I was very proud and haughty and particular, and this is how I am, this is how I'll deal with it. Uh, some version of that I'm good and you need to pay me in terms of respect, attention, money accordingly. And I need to add one thing that I did not show it outright. So even when we met the first time, and you may have thought that this guy is a very happy-go-lucky guy, these guys talk very laughingly in this. So that was part of our personality, not an act, of course, but that did not that cannot be denied that we came from a position of thinking that we were doing something extraordinary and people need to pay up for it and stuff like that. In terms of everything, not just money, but respect and uh, other things as well. So my question to you is that my response to you before I have a question is the fact that I have been constantly working on no, am I nice to know is a important factor because while I may disagree completely with where you come from as a concept uh, about whatever situation we are talking of, I have learned that this line that you have an equal right to that kind of thought as I have towards mine has to be worked upon. It's not a philosophical line. So if both of us are working, like some time back we were trying to work on something together and then kind of it seemed like that you had a particular way of looking at it and I had another way of looking at it. Besides the other things that happened, obviously I was not going to be available for a while and all that stuff. I'm saying there was this clarity, okay, oh, this is where it stands. There was no hurt, there was no, so nothing. Okay, this is where we stand. Okay, we can relook at this after a little while or things will change if they have to. But I don't have to bind Hemant or myself in a certain manner. Of course, I have put in some weeks of work and we have been trying to catch up on how to go about this. But it's fine. Let's just let's just move because there was anyway. Luckily, there was nothing concrete by then. But what I'm trying to say is that even in places where you've already invested time, effort, energy, uh, attention, sometimes even money. So if in case we were meeting outside and we'll end up spending money on lunch or this or that, all of that is investment that you're putting because you expect certain XYZ results out of it. And when that doesn't happen, then you are like, okay, did I waste my time and stuff like that. I don't come from there. I see nobody else exists in the world. I mean, it's not a very cocky thing. but it is literally I am creating my world as I go along, and there is a Hemant part of my personality that comes up as Hemant. There is a political kind of personality that comes up, which I agree with, I disagree with. There are so I am creating these experiences as I go along, like the agents in Matrix. You haven't seen last time I spoke, but when they were looking at something, so there was this one scene where there is this beggar kind of creature on a railway station, and so they transport themselves through the telephone. So when they are looking at the they call up some number and that guy will pick them up, and Star Trek जैसा they evaporate. So that there is one lady, she just called up to be okay, take us now, we are in danger. She ends up looking at the beggar, and the moment the beggar sees that she has his attention, so he turns into the agent immediately, and he shoots her, and whatever, she escapes or whatever that happens. But I realize that is kind of how the world operates. Every time I have a point, it kind of comes forward as an experience in some manner where I have to deal with it. Positive, negative doesn't matter. This doesn't always happen because I am not aware so well. Once a while, when I've really paused and slowed down and am not self-obsessed, I'm able to see these connections at times. Most times I'm self-obsessed and ignorant and avidya rules. If I had a t-shirt, I think I could very well, that could be the legend on it. And yet there are glimpses of how things seem to operate. And that kind of few micro seconds of understanding influences this rest of me, even in ignorant spaces where I am dealing with people, and I come with confidence not because of some false sense of having read this book or heard that talk or made that connection, oh, this is how it works, but more that it's okay. Nature will back you up if you have the right intent and you are not eating into somebody else's space in any manner, whether monetarily, whether philosophically, whether energy wise, whatever. You're being open ended, you're being gracious about and a little loose about your sense of self. Maybe that's a better way to put it. So my question to you, how do you see this? Because I personally am thinking that all the while it is just my journey. It's never about outside, never about this. Of course I am ignorant, I'll end up saying Hemant is right or I am wrong or this or that. All those things happen in real life discussions, those come up, and those are the ways we speak. But over a period all of this is loosening, and I am very comfortable with this vulnerable state most times. I get very worked up, but again it is not because somebody else has made me get worked up. I am incapable of handling that vulnerability in that stage for whatever my reason. So it could be loss of money, loss of opportunity, bad decision making, anything could have happened which was at that point this, but I am unable to handle because avidya is ruling, like I said. अरे यार ये ऐसा नहीं हो यार, हेमंत यार कर लेते यार, तो इधर ये हो जाता और वो हो जाता, बट वो मेरा अपना लड़ाई है, उसमें I don't see you or anybody else having so much power that you are influencing the situation for me. It is me, and I need to figure out how to calm down, be humble, stop being obstinate, greedy, any of these vikars that arise, any of these strong sense of me, myself, anything that stops me from understanding that and there is not necessarily the other person is right. Maybe I am still convinced that you are wrong. But that does not take away from the fact कि ये equation ऐसा ही होना था because इस वक्त ऐसा है. तो थोड़ा रिएक्शन को भी मैं गिन लेता हूँ कि यार ठीक है यार, तू भी थोड़ी देर रहोगे, जरा रुक जा, देखते हैं, थोड़ा 2 घंटे बाद फिर से देखते हैं. mostly within a few hours, mostly, even if it is very big, in a few hours I make my peace with it. So my question is कि ये जो कंडीशंस आपने डिस्क्राइब की तो इसमें हमेशा दूसरा पर्सन और ये नहीं हो तो क्या, और मैं जो कर रहा हूँ इज इट अगेन अनदर काइंड ऑफ सेल्फ ऑब्सेशन? दिस इज समथिंग दैट जस्ट केम अप फॉर मी. आई डोंट थिंक सो, बट नाउ सिंस वी आर टॉकिंग, व्हाट इज योर पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू?
There are a bunch of things like a Wikipedia that
Yeah. I realized when I was talking.
No, but it is beautiful, and that's how it is. That's how it is unfolding, and I think it's beautiful. I think the first there are a few things that are emerging.
Please.
तो वो अब connect करेंगे कि नहीं पता नहीं. I'll just place them. I think the first thing that emerges is this whole idea of which belongs to this whole concept of what's my deeper cosmology or belief system.
Okay.
And when we go down that path, a lot of religions, a lot of ancient wisdom, I haven't read all of them. I can't in one lifetime. Personally, I can't. Others may be or may not. But जो थोड़ा बहुत मैं जानता हूँ तो they're all trying to have very fundamental. There are some fundamental questions in almost all the wisdom tradition, which is how do you explain the ontology, which is what is real? Do you really have an access to the real, right? But the word access already assumes it's epistemological, which is knowledge-based, which is about the knowing. How do we know what we know? What's the process? Can we know better? Can we know wrongly? So there is the reality, material reality, reality. There is how do we know? There is the aspect of what is the fundamental belief about the nature of self that we have. These three questions are extremely prominent in almost all the wisdom traditions: nature of self, nature of reality, nature of knowledge. And then comes the question of ethics, aesthetics. What do we pursue and why and how? So these questions are, again, at the cost of repeating, they are fundamental to almost all the wisdom traditions. So why I invoke this is, I think a lot of times we haven't gone into the source code of these in our own self, but we use them. We use all of these every moment. It's just that we don't know how to connect them, ground them into these questions. So depending on the cosmology you have, you will have the sense of self or others, whether others are Maya or Leela or partial reality or evolving or unchanging. Now, once you ground it there, then you can begin to ask questions around. If I don't believe, so for example, if I don't believe anything is outside, then you have a very different experience and view of what you're trying to pursue.
Yeah.
But if you believe there is something outside and you need to have an outer engagement, then your pursuits are going to be different. Let me put this in the following way. I think Sri Aurobindo has been in Indian psyche for some people. He walked this planet almost 100 years back. He was part of the freedom struggle. And while one time in jail for a long period of time, he had that whole realization and stuff. And that's where he started this whole movement of the integral yoga. Now, a lot of wisdom traditions calls people more and more inwardly and withdrawal from the world. Sri Aurobindo and some other would actually say, yes, go inward, but in the service of the world. So engage with the world even more. So, depending again on the cosmologies that we carry, we will have very different approaches. So one of the issues that I see with most of the debates happening in the world is this idea that while at the surface we are trying to discuss a lot of our discord, dissonance, conflict, I think unless we go and stake it into the deeper belief system, we won't become aware of each other's spaces better. So I'll not meet you where you are. I'll only keep meeting myself where I am, and trying to get really frustrated with this whole idea that you're not meeting it. Um, but there are two things that happen. Even when you go deeper, you will find that you're in very different geographies. And then the essential question is, if you are holding and are resident of different geographies, how do you trade emotions? How do you trade concepts? How do you trade coordination? And for what? And then when you put in the input, output, and outcome, how will you distribute that? What's a fair way of distributing? So that's my very first invocation, that most of the questions that are becoming extremely subjective, extremely conflicting, need a deeper exploration and deeper exchange. And even with the idea that even while going deeper and after we are exhausted with the deeper, we might disagree and we might still be in discord. The second thing that comes to me is this 2 by 2, which is so imagine I want to be appearing intelligent. I want to be appearing wise. I want to be appearing ethically, some superior superhuman. That's my want. But what you take of me doesn't necessarily mean that जो मुझे चाहिए वही आप देंगे. So imagine I want X as perception of me in you. You may get Y. However much I try the X, right? And vice versa. So I think we'll constantly have this challenge where when we meet people, we will not meet the way we want or they want. We'll keep meeting all kinds of places, and so that's the second bucket. The third bucket is this whole bucket of my relationship with my own self. Am I funny to my own self? Am I playful with my own self? Do I enjoy my own company? Or am I too serious with myself? And I think if I flip the gaze of, being enjoyable to the other, painful to the other, wise to the other, intelligent, I think sometimes it's over a period of time, we should have both the flips, We should flip inwards and say, am I funny? Are there times in the day when I surprise myself that, oh shit, I keep playing a lot of jokes in my head and I'm smiling, and the other person may or may not understand why am I smiling, but I'm smiling because I'm funny to myself and something occurred to me. So I feel this outwardly gaze, under certain cosmology, the outwardly gaze could be useful, but I think an equally important gaze could be inwardly and being friendly to yourself. Am I vulnerable to my own self? So many times I have through the day. I may have done podcast. This may be X number of episode that we are doing, but sometimes I may be nervous. कि क्या हो रहा होगा? ये question आया, अरे suddenly there is micro nervousness, micro vulnerability to my own self. So yeah, I think I'll sum up. There is the cosmology, deeper belief system, the deeper geographies that we need to hold and explore. There is what I want and what I end up actually the other person perceiving me as. So I want X, the other person perceives X. I want X, person perceives Y. I want Y, they perceive Y. I want Y, they perceive X. So, and vice versa. So that will keep happening. And third is my own relationship with my own self. Am I painful to my own self? Am I funny to my own self? Also as a base.
One of the things that struck me now was that while we've been talking a lot about states of being which are exploratory in our answers as of right now, there is also I did cover a part of one of the questions is about confidence. Where does confidence spring from, according to you? So, for example, I'm sitting with you and talking about an exploratory space, but I have clear questions coming up. I have this innate confidence in my ability to think of something that is worthy of contemplation as of right now. I'm talking sheer manifestation as a viewer who might be seeing, अरे यार ये तो क्या सुपर बंदा है इसको सब मालूम है. In my head there is no such thing. I'm just my tongue is moving, the questions are coming out, and there might be some deeper process. Obviously, the brain connecting with this, and but I don't really form the question even as I speak. Sometimes it just I have a hint of a question in my head, and I go with it. Like you said, there are some spaces we manage to create. This is one of the lucky spaces that we both coexist in, cohabitate for a little while, and we are able to. Are we able to take this outside? I am unaware, but here we surely are always in that space. So my question to you is, where does confidence emanate from according to you when we are going out in the world? Say for example, so I have this service called discomfort coaching. People who come to me for that are sometimes they bring questions which are way beyond my ken. Like somebody might come and talk about some subject which is like really testing my uh, ability to understand that subject, or the quantum of thing being discussed. So if it is money, then the money that they are talking of, and I am like, oh, I have never seen that kind of money personally, and I don't know how to deal with this. And yet, at that point, I cannot mention that to them. I need to show that I am confident without lying. Obviously, I will not sit down and lie that I am a master of this game. I don't do any such thing. I sit with you in that vulnerability. I try and be your companion for that moment in that journey, and try and see it from your perspective. How much can I deal with it? And I allow the truth of what comes to me to be shared with you, because you also know the truth, but perhaps because you're so emotionally connected to that whole thing that you're unable to name it to yourself. So, for example, the one that I was saying, if a person has an ailing parent and the ailment is fairly serious, and uh, chances of that person's parent making it seems very difficult. So at that point of time, I will never say things. I will anyway never say things will be all right. I always say things will never be all right. Now tell me who you are. Let's approach from there, because life has its own plans, irrespective. So if luckily they are all right, then any which ways we are on a good wicket. But let's prepare for what is not all right, and how do we see this and what happens. But these things are not enjoyable. These things, you don't come to me to listen to these things necessarily. You would want a confident answer. Don't worry, I'm there. And oh, of course, let me tell you a few success stories. This is how it happens. This is how. Where does confidence emanate from? And I now am asking, if you liked the earlier question, then I am liking this question even more. Where does real confidence based in truth emanate from? And what is it about, and how do we go about it? I have my own version of it, obviously, but I would rather that you contemplate aloud on camera for me. How does this work for you, or not? Because you come for answers. When we are meeting, so you and I are thinkers, we at least हमारा काम ही है थोड़ा, वो जॉब प्रोफाइल ही है कि कॉन्टेम्पलेशन में रह सकते हैं. बट कोई पैसे दे देता है तो उसके बाद वो भी ये इंतजार करता है कि कब ये दोनों जन इतनी बातें कर रहे हैं, बट अब लिख के क्या देंगे, प्रपोजल क्या है, करने वाले क्या हैं, कैसे करने वाले हैं. So you understand where we are coming from. There needs to be concrete ideas. So my question is, yes, where does that confidence or concreteness of thought, if I were to call it, come from, and preferably if you could answer with a base of truth, because false confidence doesn't matter for them, so it is just I just need to come and portray myself as someone. So then that is not an answer that satisfies my curiosity at this point of time.
Um, Long back, I had taken a course, an online course, and interesting person. There was a course, I think, in maybe some philosophy. I vaguely remember the name of the person, Tamar Gandler, Professor Tamar Gandler. And she had this interesting 2x2. On the x-axis, imagine there is a task demand. That the task demands a certain kind of thing from you. So imagine it demands extremely high from you. It demands very low from you. And y-axis is your ability to deal with that task demand. So imagine you have very high ability and you have very low ability with that task demand. So you can see if the task demand is very low and your ability is low or high, it doesn't matter. It might be very boring for you. That's where whole banality, chore, boring comes in. It's not the question of not being able to do, it's just that you're wanting to do it is in question. So chores, banalities, cliches, done to death, beating the bush, all of them are in that zone. Sometimes the task demand are low and your abilities are very, very high. You get frustrated because you don't know what to do with the ability that you have. Somebody is just making some banal statements in the conversation, and you have a certain cosmology, and you just then start disdaining that person, hating that person, getting frustrated. Ki yaar, get to the point, give me something, give me a good debate, or give me something. Right? Sometimes the task demand is high and your ability is also very high. That's where you have a lot of flow experience. You get in that flow. Sometimes the task demand is very high, but your abilities are very low. That's where you get very anxious, insecure, nervous, so on and so forth. So this, I think, is an interesting 2x2 to meditate on. That's my first invocation. The second invocation is, if I look at Bhakti Yoga, Gyan Yoga, Karma Yoga, I think if I understand a little bit of Bhakti Yoga, then a lot of people have confidence, trust, faith, hope on superhuman, super entity. All of their confidence, a huge part of their confidence stems from super entity. And whatever they end up deciding or choosing or doing, it's either wished for or prayed for or in the service of the super entity. They draw a lot of confidence from the super entity. When it comes to Gyan Yoga, people who are predominantly Gyan Yoga oriented, their confidence would come from churning of knowledge, wisdom over a period of time, and being in that journey, and that would give them predominantly the confidence that they want in life. For people who do not have any of the other two and are predominantly action oriented, for them, just doing more and more of action and having tinkering around them, successes and failure around them could give them confidence. So in a nutshell, I think we have all three: Bhakti Yoga, Gyan Yoga, Karma Yoga, but something could be predominant either in a phase of life or overall in the life or through personalities. So that's these are the two initial invocations I have.
Uh, I'm looking at the clock and I think we've clocked an hour or more on this. Uh, it's been a beautiful morning discussion on stuff that I have been contemplating for a long time, but never been able to break it down in the logical manner, or rather, our particular kind of logic. Uh, so beautiful. I would want to spend some time on this and come back to you on a personal level at times discussing this. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. This has been a very wonderful discussion today. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much. Thank you, Bunty. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thanks.
Bye.